which we did in the test facilities in Europe, we transferred the spacecraft to our launch site in French Guiana. This is a South American department of France. And since we did this last summer in August, and since then we've been doing the final checkout of the spacecraft, making sure that it's ready to launch. Here we'll be able to see some of the activities which we actually have performed at the end of last year. So here we are in the last integration hall in French Guiana. You can see this is the Russian docking mechanism. It's partly extended now. In fact, it's being extended, as you can see. We obviously did all the last tests of all the subsystems. Here is it extended, making sure that it works perfectly properly before we ship up to the space station. Here again, this is this enormous great, what I call the 2 spacecraft, the final checkout of this electronics bay, where we have all the electronics to actually control the final rendezvous with the space station. And finally, we're looking at some areas here where this is the back end of the integrated cargo carrier. Here you can see the tanks which take up the Russian fuel. And of course, finally, we had to load the dry cargo. Now, this is for Jules Verne. We're taking about 1,300 kilograms of this dry cargo. It has to be very clean because we mustn't take any germs up there, so it was very well cleaned. The whole of the inside of the cargo carrier was disinfected, tested for any sort of microbiological problems that we could take up there, and of course it's absolutely clean, and it was a major task to hand carry and put all this loading inside the racks. And finally, we have to put on the final parts of the what we call the monthly layer insulation. This is a thermal blanket all the way outside, which gives us the right thermal conditions, the right temperatures inside the spacecraft. This has to be meticulously integrated around that. And finally, before we actually closed up the cargo carrier itself, we cleaned it out so that, again, as I said, so there's no microbiological problems left in there. So that was what we've been doing over the last 3 months. Where are we now? We've now actually filled the fuel on board for the Russian systems. We did that in January. Recently, we've been putting the main fuel on board, and in fact, tomorrow, Friday, the 1st of February, we're going to put on the final oxidizer. So by beginning of next week, the whole spacecraft will be in a state ready to be launched. Next week, we'll do the final things like the multi-layer insulation final integration. And get it ready, and by the end of next week we hope to be ready to transfer our spacecraft from the fueling area into the final integration building, and then when we go on top of Ariane launch vehicle. We then start about 3 weeks of combined operations with the launch vehicle, when we first of all, obviously, we get put on top of the launch vehicle, then we do various checks, make sure that everything is working and all the umbilicals down through the launch vehicle are working perfectly all right. We take off all the covers off the optical sensors. We have obviously had to be very careful that these don't get contaminated or dust particles get put on them while we're doing all this integration. And then when we're on top of the launch vehicle, eventually, about 3 days before launch, the fairing will go on top, and one day will get rolled out to the launch pad. Now, as Alan said, we're looking to a launch preparation or readiness somewhere between the 22nd of February, we believe, and maybe the 2 weeks after that. As you can see, we're in a very good shape at the moment. We should be there also with the launch vehicle, which by the end of next week will also go into the final integration area. So once we launch, what do we do then? We take, first of all, Ariane takes us into a launch circular orbit of 230 kilometers. We will then, with our own motors, raise the orbit to the same height as the International Space Station. This takes about 10 days. And then after various demonstrations, which my colleague Bob will talk about, to show that we're operating all right, we'll dock with the space station. So what we're looking at is sometime we have various docking windows. We have some in the middle of March, some at the end of March. Our basic idea is we will launch when we're ready, when the flight segment ready, when the ground segment is ready, and when Ariane is ready. And then we have flexibility to stay near the space station and dock when it's ready for the space station, when they have a gap in their air traffic, as Mike said, and also when the sun angles are right. So we have a lot of flexibility, and we'll fit in and we'll land like when the air traffic controllers say we can. So that's what's going to happen over the next weeks. Let's see where we are on Ariane. I think we have a picture of Ariane in its final integration stage. Yes, this was taken 2 weeks ago. This is the Ariane which we're going to get launched on, and this is the upper stage being put on it. Now, again, this is something unique for the ATV mission. Normally, when Ariane is taking something to a geostationary orbit, it only fires the upper stage once. We, however, will use a reboost of the upper stage so that we get eventually into our circular orbit. So here you can see the final integration. And as I said, that's all going to be ready, and they will also be ready to go to the final integration building by the end of next week. For those people who don't know where our launch site is, here we have a map of the world with Kourou. This is, as I said, French Guiana. In fact, it is part of France. It's a department of France. The great advantage of this is that it's virtually on the equator. It's 6 degrees north. So for any launch, you get a real boost by the spin of the Earth. So it's a very nice